Hey everyone, Nick Yuskevich here with Daily Fantasy Winners, bringing you the next edition of Tee to Green, and it's for the WGC Mexico Championship. This is the first WGC of the year, where we have got a limited field, obviously, because it's a WGC, 65 golfers total. There is no cut at this tournament as a result. And this is going to be a higher variance tournament because of that. Not only that, actually, just because this is a tournament that is at a pretty new course still to everybody. This is only the second time this WGC tournament has been in Mexico. And so this is just going to be a higher variance tournament. So my recommendation for this week is limit your bankroll, limit the amount of lineups you make, whatever you want to do as far as just kind of limiting your overall exposure into your bankroll and everything like that. So just something it's a little advice there just to keep in mind. Is just going to be a higher variance week. For those of you that don't know what WGC is, just for those who are new to PGA DFS golf, WGCs, they're World Golf Championships. They're essentially mini majors. Like I said, it's a smaller field. We still have a lot of the top players in the game. It is really pretty much what it is you'll get a major quality field as far as the top 50 players or so. And then you'll still get a few outliers in there after that, but you usually don't get that group of people that's like, 50th to 100th in here, or 100th to 150th in here, these outliers, so to speak. But you get a lot of like the top 50 to 60-ish players in the world usually at this tournament. And so there are a couple top names that are skipping it this year, and I actually understand why they're doing it, and I can elaborate on it in a second. But you'll see we got Dustin Johnson, Justin Thomas, John Rahm, Jordan Spieth, Tommy Fleetwood, Ricky Fowler, etc. But you'll notice there's no Hideki Matsuyama, there's no Henrik Stenson, there's no Jason Day. There aren't a couple that the top names in there. I think the reason is because of the way it fits into the schedule right now. Because this tournament used to be at Doral, and Doral is in Florida, if you didn't know that. But the Florida swing started last week at the Honda Classic. And this tournament always was in Florida, so it just blended right in with the Florida swing. This tournament's now in Mexico. And because you had the Honda Classic last week, and people were already coming from the West Coast to the East Coast, or people just like playing the Florida tournaments and everything like that, there are probably some people that don't really want to have to relocate to Mexico and then come back into Florida type of thing. Really, the Honda Classic and the WGC Mexico, these two tournaments need to flip spots on the calendar as far as when these tournaments should be played, just because it makes sense from a travel standpoint, and it probably makes sense from fitting it in. I guess it doesn't really fit in if you're concerned about the Riviera strength of field and will people play back-to-back. Maybe, I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot of little variables to consider, but from a travel standpoint, it just doesn't make sense to have this one where it is right now. I think they should flip-flop the weeks for next year. But anyways, that's a side thing. And so we still got a lot of top players in the game. So a couple things I'm going to point out to you here real quick before we get into the top players. The tournament history tab I'm going to show you here. If we take a look here, WGC Mexico at 7,330 yards. This plays a lot shorter than that because this course is played in altitude. The ball is going to fly very easily. Sorry, I got an alarm going off. The ball's going to fly very easily. So this does not play like middle of the road distance wise on tour at 7,330 yards. It's going to play. It's not the shortest course on tour, but it is on the shorter end. There's no doubt about it. As far as difficulty goes, you'll see it is at a .057. It means it pretty much plays even par, just barely over par for the average person at last year's tournament. Keep in mind also, the data I use for this tab here, or this tool, goes back through 2014 for every tournament with a couple of exceptions. This is one of those exceptions because this tournament has just been in Mexico only 1 year. It doesn't make sense to use Doral information here for Mexico when we're factoring in a lot of this data. It just doesn't make sense. The only thing that's similar is essentially the strength of the field. Other than that, everything else is going to be different. So keep that in mind. As far as the length goes, I just wanted to point it out in case if you're worried about distance. There's kind of a trade-off here. On one hand, distance doesn't matter because this is going to end up being a shorter course. But on the flip side, all these guys in this tournament, for all intents and purposes, are at least decent length hitters, if not bombers. And length helps actually a little bit for eagles at this tournament as well. There's .11 eagles here, I believe it is at this tournament. Where'd you go, Mexico? There you are. .11 eagles. That's actually on the higher side for eagles. It's like top 10 for most eagles allowed per round. And so you've got a thing where it's like all the guys to here are decent length hitters. They'll all be able to make eagles, and it's not that long of a golf course, though. So I would not worry about length here. I really wouldn't worry about driving accuracy too much either. Strokes gained off the tee pops up a little bit here, but it's really strokes gained approaching the green is really where it's going to show up, is the ball striking, the approach shots, and everything like that. That's really where it's going to pop up here. It's kind of been a theme here lately over the past few weeks, but that's just kind of where we're at. And so, in any case, all right, we can move on here now, I believe, to this tournament. Oh, actually, one more thing strategy-wise. I'm going to just point this out real quick. Because this is a limited field, you might think that there are fewer golfers to choose from in general. That's really not the case. And I'm just going to do this from a DraftKings standpoint here pretty clearly. We got 5 guys 10K and above. That seems to be a pretty common theme here on DraftKings here this year so far, at least in 2018. We've got about 4 9K guys. We have about a dozen 8K guys, and then we have maybe 27K guys, maybe a little bit more than that, like 25 or so. That's common. That's usually what we've been seeing every week. Usually what we do, though, is we see a ton of guys between 6,600 and like 7,000, 71, 7,200. There are just a ton of guys in there, and a lot of them are unplayable because the odds per dollar is so bad by DraftKings and a little bit FanDuel, but way more DraftKings. But just that the odds at the sportsbooks don't really reflect the salaries, that you just end up with a ton of unplayable guys. Basically, we just don't have a bunch of those unplayable guys here this week in the limited field. The amount of good players or reasonable choices to choose from are the same amount this week as they are in previous weeks. So as far as an inflated ownership perspective, we're not going to see that here this week just from a limited field perspective. There will still be some guys with higher ownerships, obviously, as far as who's playing well and odds per dollar and all that type of stuff. We'll see that. Don't worry. But as far as is everybody's ownerships going to be inflated? No, they're not. That's not going to happen. So just look, if you look down here, I'll just show you this real quick, between 6,600 and 7K, other than Jonathan Vegas, honestly, you ask even I don't want to say maybe the hardcore golf fan, but if you ask a pretty good golf fan, hey, do you know any of these names up here? They might be able to name 2 or 3 of them. Yudai Keita's played in some of the majors. He's one of the top Japanese players. That's not really a regular on the PGA Tour. He's a top Japan Tour player. There's a couple guys in here who might be able to know. Brand Stone has popped up here on the PGA Tour sometimes and things like that, or the European Tour. But for the most part, these guys, a lot of just your common average golf fans haven't even heard of these guys. And the truth of the matter is, there's a reason why their odds are pretty bad here. And so, in any case, Sharma looks like he has some okay odds, I guess, for somebody that's 7K. But for the most part here, these guys are going to be unplayable. And so we're going to have a lot of guys here from the lower 7K range, though, all the way up. All these guys are, for all intents and purposes, playable to some extent or another. So, okay, the top guys in the game. Taking a look here. I'm going to start with Dustin Johnson and Justin Thomas because it's the same reason for both guys here. If you're doing if you're doing just a cash lineup, or you're doing 1 or 2 GPP lineups, something like that, I would probably avoid Dustin and Justin. The reason for that is because I want to make sure I would say you want to make sure you get at least 2 of these 10 to 9K guys, or maybe even 3 to 4, or even 4, depending on how it works out, but 10 to 9 to 8K range. All these guys are very, very good players. I think they all have a very good chance this week in what is going to be a high variance tournament. And obviously, all these guys are near the top players in the world. And some of these guys you will see, if it was a weaker field, you would see Sergio up here, probably closer to 10K. You would see Paul Casey up here, at least in the 9K range. These are all near top players in the world. They're all very good, and it's a high variance tournament, like I said. And because I also made the point here, a lot of these guys here in the lower 6K range, there's nobody really worth an option here except Vegas. And so for the most part here, you want to your lowest owned guy, or your lowest played player in your lineup, is going to be in the lower 7K range. And I want to make sure I get some of these guys up here. And so if you just put in Dustin or Justin, you're going to be a little bit limited in grabbing some of these guys here, and you're going to be forced to probably grab somebody, down in the 6K range, or maybe one too many guys here in the 7K range. And I would just rather have the value, because the drop off here from a lot of these guys in this mid 7K range, like Steele, Duffner, Kisner, Reed, even Haotong Lee as well, Perez, because all these guys, the drop-off from them to some of these guys in the 6K range is significantly more than what you're getting from Dustin Johnson and Justin Thomas to Jon Rahm, Jordan Spieth, and Tommy Fleetwood. I think that's pretty obvious. So just from a value perspective, even though the odds say that they're by far clear in a way the favorites, I would rather get some of these 10K guys and 9K guys. Obviously, Dustin and Justin and all these guys here at the top, they're all capable of winning. If you're doing a bunch of GPP lineups type of thing, and you want to do a bunch of GPP ones, then obviously you want to probably get a little exposure to them just to make sure, because they obviously can win, no kidding. But as far as you just making a couple, I'd probably look elsewhere. Just as far as statistics for them very quickly, I'll just tell you, Dustin, running a little bit hot with the putter still at a minus 0.29 for our strokes gained putting regression tool, and he's at a 0.38 on the year, so which is a little bit better than what he normally does. So running a little hot, not incredibly hot. And his strokes gained, actually, the one interesting thing here is, while he is strokes gained first off the tee, which really is a shocker to nobody, he's 63rd in approaching the green. So Dustin's irons and wedges actually have been a little off here, actually, over the last few weeks. And that's not what you want coming into this tournament in particular. I'm not, like, overly concerned about it by any means, but it's just something to keep in mind that that's kind of hurting Dustin a little bit. And he's third in strokes gained around the green. And strokes gained around the green, like chipping and all that type of stuff, that usually is actually pretty high variance stuff too. Kind of like strokes gained putting is a little bit, and why we have the strokes gained putting regression model. And so, not that Dustin has a horrible short game, but third that's really high for him. So I don't know if that's going to be a sustainable thing. And so I would actually say that this is kind of a nice little spot to go against Dustin here potentially, despite being the defending champ. It's just pretty expensive, and a couple things going against him. So. Justin Thomas, I mean, obviously he's the defending champ, so that's why his salary is as expensive as it is. So obviously, like, if he had just finished even, like, second, if he had lost that playoff last week, I bet you he would have been, like, 10,600, like around John Rahm, or 10,800. These odds are inflated because he won last week, and so is the price for that matter. And so Justin Thomas right now, strokes gained putting, he's at a minus 0.17, so running slightly hot, but not really. And Justin Thomas is somebody who's a rising star on tour, and if you actually look at 2017, he was a 0.29, and he's a 0.25 this year. So really, Justin's probably a slightly above average putter. It would not be surprising if that's the new norm. And so this minus 0.17 might actually just be like a zero, for all intents and purposes. So, but again, I wouldn't pay the price for it when you've got other good options up here. Moving on to John Rahm. I actually not that into John Rahm this week because John Rahm is 141st in strokes gained approaching the green. His irons and wedges have actually been pretty poor here over the last several weeks. And so he is second in strokes gained off the tee. So he's basically he has pretty similar statistics to Dustin Johnson, except that the statistics are just a little bit worse in every area, and particularly approaching the green, obviously, is much worse. And then actually, the strokes gained around the green for Rahm has been 89th, so that's not running as hot, but still, like, Rahn probably actually, as far as the strokes gained around the green, I'm still wondering if he has a good short game around the green, because we've seen him with some strokes gained around the green troubles here, certainly at times. And so, anyways, but for Rahn, though, because the strokes gained approaching the green is as bad as it is, and it's been as of late, that's probably not my top choice here as far as the top guys go. So we'll move on to Jordan Spieth and Tommy Fleetwood. I really like both of these guys this week. Jordan Spieth, it's kind of the same theme here. All the statistics look great, especially the strokes gained approaching the green with him is 22nd, 49th off the tee, 19th tee to green. So the strokes gained is very good for Jordan. He's 164th putting this year, and that's actually better than what it's been the last couple of weeks. So the regression has actually started happening positively already for Jordan Spieth. And his recent form actually is still really good, other than that one miscut at Phoenix where the putter was just super abysmal for him that 1 week. But Spieth's playing very good besides the putter, and it's starting to come around here even in the last week or two. And so he's a 0.56 in our strokes gained putting regression tool model, and that's obviously due for some pretty good positive stuff here moving forward. So definitely like Spieth. And as far as Tommy Fleetwood, the ball striking has just been absolutely fantastic, and I don't think Fleetwood's going anywhere. He is, where is it? He's second in strokes gained tee to green. He's 6th off the tee, 16th approaching the green, 12th around the green, and 113th putting. So the one thing with Fleetwood is we don't have a ton of history to go off of with him because of he has been primarily a European Tour player. He hasn't really been much of a PGA Tour player. He's starting to be more now as of late. And so we not 100% sure how good he is in every area. But I will say this. I absolutely love the fact that his ball striking is as good as it is, and that seems to be the one consistent thing for him here, whether it's here or over in the European Tour. And as far as the strokes gained putting goes, there's nothing wrong that looks wrong with his putting game. I don't think there's any hole in his game. I just think it's running a little bit poorly. Not maybe like extremely bad, but it's running a little bit horribly for him. And so I really like the ball striking statistics for Fleetwood. And honestly, like I said, I don't think this is going to be a guy that we're going to see in August where it's like, oh, he's now he's 50th in odds or something at a big tournament. Like, I don't think that's happening. I think Fleetwood's a top 10 player, and I don't think that's changing anytime soon. He really is that good. His swing looks fantastic. So just my 2 cents there. I'll just cut into a couple of these cheaper guys. By cheaper, I mean $9,000, just because it's a WGC. Ricky Fowler, you've seen what's happening now finally, now that the putter's not running hot for him. He's missing cuts. So Fowler actually now has, I'll just show it to you in our putting regression tool model. You know how long it's been telling us that, hey, Fowler's going to run cold with the putter. Well, guess what? Ricky Fowler now, hey, he dropped to a .31 this year, and he is now at pretty much zero, a .03. And he missed the cut. And so this is one of those things why I would say you should definitely trust this putting regression tool model. It's not perfect by any means, and you have to do a little bit of understanding who every player is and how much history do they have and everything like that, and knowing what kind of a player they are. There is a little bit to know with that, but if you can apply that with this model, you're going to find an edge here, I think, against a lot of people out there. And so yeah, this is why I said go against Fowler last week, and that happened to pan out. And so he's missed 2 cuts here over the last 3 weeks at the Honda and the Farmers, but obviously 11th at Phoenix and then 4th in Kapalua. And so Fowler, he even said it actually in his press conference last week after he missed the cut on Friday. He had said, my ball striking was decent Kapalua, but he said it himself. Ever since then, I just haven't felt like I've had my swing as of late, and it just hasn't been on point. And the statistics show it. There's no doubt. He's 79th in strokes gained off the tee and 54th in approaching the green. He's 8th in strokes gained around the green right now, so he's actually running hot there, probably with the short game a little bit, just as far as around the green goes. And so there's no doubt that the ball striking's been off for Ricky a little bit. His ownership will probably be down a little bit this week just because of the missed cuts, but he's still a relatively popular player and everything, so I don't think it's going to be too low. So just all in all, I'd probably say Fowler's not your best bet here until he kind of gets that ball striking a little bit more, kind of on point. The guys I will say, though, for down here, though, that I do like this week are Justin Rose and Sergio Garcia. Phil Mickelson is very quick. His recent performance is fantastic as far as results. The problem is he is a minus .71 in strokes gained putting right now. That's not. Phil is an outstanding putter. That is not sustainable. He is gaining .91 strokes on the field putting right now. And I'll just show you Phil real quickly just so you can see it. I'm sure you guys have seen this, but Phil .912. Here this season, and as you see, we know he's Phil's a decent putter and he's above average, certainly by far, but he is not this good. And so if you do take a look at Phil's stats outside of the putting, and you just take a look at this year, Phil is 162nd off the tee right now. Phil's still spraying it kind of all over the place. He is 7th in approaching the green, which is I cannot believe somebody can be that good in strokes gained approaching the green and that bad off the tee, because if you're 162nd in strokes gained off the tee, your strokes gained approaching the green can still kind of only be so good. They're somewhat independent, but they are dependent on each other a little bit. There are certain it's very difficult to be really good in one and really bad in another. It is tough to do that, and Phil's managed to do that. So because his iron play is insane, and he's an insane recovery player. That's going to be tough to do though at Chapultepec, just because you do need to find the fairway a lot here. I actually do know Phil put the driver away, or he very rarely hit it at Chapultepec last year, so he'll probably do something similar here this week. So I guess that would be one positive thing. But bottom line, he's a minus .71 in the strokes gained putting. I would not play Phil here. But I do like Justin Rose and I do like Sergio Garcia. They're two guys that their ball striking is absolutely fantastic. Sergio putter let him down a little bit last week. But the ball striking wasn't quite as perfect for Sergio last week, but it was still not bad. And then, Rosie's still playing very well. Rose has been on a month break. That's probably the only thing I don't like. He hasn't played since the Farmers Insurance Open on January 25th. So that's a little... I don't want to call it a red flag, but it's a little thing. But I don't know if I like that. But still, nevertheless, the recent form's still very good. The ball striking's all great and everything like that. So nothing really against Rose. And so that's going to do it here for this week's episode. Hopefully this information has helped you. And so I'm at Nicky Skevich on Twitter, Daily Fantasy Winners on Twitter, at DFantasyWinners, and appreciate all the likes to the videos and the subscriptions as well. All right, good luck, everybody.